Hello fellow crafters, Janine here, and today I'm bringing you another coloring page video. This one also was, the images were provided by Mayot Silk, which is www.maatsilk.com. And this is from her spring garden set, and I really like this set of images. It immediately gave me an idea of how to play with them for a card. And I also had a request from a subscriber about doing a watercolor video kind of showing more of the process of actually going into the paints and the water jugs, you know, so that they could see more in depth and more in detail how we're loading the paintbrush, how much water we're getting, and so forth. So I thought this would be a fun video to do that with. It's an easy coloring page. It's not overly detailed, so we can actually go through it fairly quickly. And hopefully this palette cam situation that I've got going on here, with any luck, fingers crossed, with any luck, my video editor and my editing skills will be up to par enough to be able to incorporate both palette cam and coloring cam for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do, and this is what I do anytime I sit down to watercolor, is I take a spray bottle and mist my colors and get them wet and get the pigments flowing. And for today's palette, I'm just using a piece of paper. It's a plain piece of white paper that I just ran through my laminator and laminated it. Since the coloring is in small areas, I'm not going to be having to mix large puddles of color at a time, so this should be plenty sufficient. Of course, I've got my usual towel on hand for wiping up excess moisture off the brush, for removing a little bit of pigment off the brush if necessary. So I've got that handy right here, and I'm gonna start with the little shovel and rake image, and I think for that I'm gonna use this number 6 Simply Simmons brush. Now this bucket of water is my rinse brush, or my rinse water rather, and then this jar of water is going to be my clean water. And after I get my brush wet, I kind of just examine the amount of water that's in it, and then wipe any moisture from the ferrule or the brush, because I don't want extra moisture dripping down my brush and into, or down my handle or ferrule and into my brush area. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up some of this brown color, and it is what I would describe as a burnt sienna, not sienna, I'm sorry, a burnt umber is as close of a comparison as I can give it. And this is the Kuretake Gansai Tambi 24 pan watercolor set. And I feel like this brush is maybe just a little bit too wet with pigment, so I'm just going to remove a little bit of the moisture on my towel. And I'm going to do my best to stay in the lines today. Now I am working on dry paper. I didn't wet the paper first. And occasionally I do just pick up a little bit of the straight pigment that's somewhat moist just directly out of the pan and apply it in the areas that I want to have a little bit more depth of color, where I would consider it to be like, say, the handle here is worn It's been digging in the dirt a lot. Maybe some areas the sun has bleached the color out a bit. And look what I just did. I am going to have to be a bit less clumsy about the way I go about things. I don't know if I'll be able to blot that up or not. And I need to mix some colors here to get a bit of a gray for the shovel and the spade, I guess. Well, no, that's not a spade, or the little rake here. Let me give these another little mist. So for that, let me get a little bit of water on my palette. I'm going to take this really dark blue and I'm going to take some of this, what appears to me to be a burnt sienna color, and see what kind of gray we get out of that. And that's looking about the right color right there. And remember, watercolors do dry, or as they dry, they lighten. So it might look really dark going on. But it is going to dry down to a much lighter color. Now I'm imagining my light coming from this direction, and so that's why I just blotted up a little bit of the color to give it a highlight right there. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more and deepen the colors on this side. Oh, and I think it's important to mention that I did print these images onto 140 pound oh gosh, I don't remember. I think this was 140 pound cold press paper. It's Canson XL. Yes, it is 140 pound cold press. I cut it down to 8.5 by 11 size. Now I gotta tell you, and I did print it on a laser printer, and that's why you see that the ink is not running, because I did not print it on an inkjet printer. I did print it on a laser printer. But one important thing to note about that is my laser printer doesn't exactly love this heavy paper that much. So it took a little finessing to and not, you know, I didn't run too many images at once on this heavy paper. Okay, so I just took, I'm sorry, let me explain this real quick. I just took a wet brush, just with water on it, and just applied a little moisture to that area where I blotted up color, because I wanted to soften that edge. I didn't want it to be such a hard edge. So I want the highlight, but I don't want it to be a very hard highlight. And now I'm just picking up some more of the pigment that I mixed, and I'm going to work on the rake. And again, I'm going to blot up just the tiniest bit of color here on the very tips of the rake. I'm having a little trouble staying in the lines today. Now you notice I don't rub when I pick color up, I just press. And again, with just a damp brush, I'm just going to soften out those edges. I'm going to put just a little bit more color right here. And I'm picking up some more pigment here. And deepening up the color in this area. I got a little too much moisture there, so I just dried my brush off, and now I'm just kind of moving that moisture around and picking some of it up with my brush. I'm getting my brush pretty dry that time to just again blend out those edges, because I don't want hard edges and I don't want blooms. I want things to blend naturally from one color transition to the next. And I want this area of the handle to be really dark, so I'm probably going to go over it a couple of times. And I'm going to wet this a little bit and pick up, or attempt to pick up, a little bit more of that color. I feel like I lost some of the highlight in the blending. And now with this just lightly damp brush, I'm just kind of blending out those edges again. Okay, and I'm gonna let that dry. And I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna see a couple of little spots I missed here. I'm gonna fill those in. Probably should have used just a little bit smaller brush. I thought this brush looked about right for that area. Now in this area right here, I'm gonna add a little bit more pigment to have shadow there. And a little bit more here. And here. And again, I'm going to rinse my brush and dry it off with my towel. And then just blend those edges out. And if I feel like I'm getting too much pigment on my brush from the blending, I just wipe it on my towel. See right here on this blending, it kind of got a hard edge on it, so I'm just going to go back with a little water or just a damp brush and just soften that edge out. Like I said, my brush is really pretty dry doing this. I get a lot of the moisture, I mean I get the majority of the moisture out, because if I don't, I'll just create another hard edge or a bloom. I think I took a little too much pigment off there. Okie dokie. Now I'm going to get some of this kind of reddish, deep scarlet color. Kind of reminds me of alizarin crimson. That's about the closest description I can give. And I do think I'm going to change brushes. I think I'm going to go with something smaller. This is a number 3 round by Daler and Rowney. And in my mind, for whatever reason, this little band on these tools, these gardening tools, was red. Okay, and to stick with some of the same basic colors, I'm going to continue to use this red and paint the flowers. I'm going to move on from the shovel and rake. And what I'm going to do is pick up a little bit of green. Not too much, and I just want to darken this red, or a little bit of it. Kind of give me a deep burgundy. And I probably got a little too much green there, but that's okay. We just add a little more red to it. And blot some of that off because I feel like I've got too heavy of a pigment load on my brush. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that at the base of these flowers. And you see I'm kind of doing every other petal. So we get everything wet all next to each other that can become problematic. Now what I'm going to do with these, I'm going to rinse my brush off and clean it off. And then dip it in a little clean water, but again get some of the excess moisture out, and I'm just going to pull this color out, and that was entirely too much water. Let me pick some of it up with my brush, and it does like a gradient wash and gives our color, our little petal, all the color it needs. And again I'm going to get a lot of the moisture out of that, but I do need a little bit of moisture, and just pull that color out. With these little bitty petals it's easy to do, or a little bit easier, because you're not having to do so much of a large gradient, but it does all the shading for us, so we don't have to get real fussy with the shading on these little petals. So you have your deeper colors where you need them, but then they come out lighter. And if I wanted to get even lighter, I could pick up some of this rose color. And blend in there with them. I felt like I had a little too much pigment in there, so I'm just pulling it back a little bit. If I feel like I lost too much of my dark color while it's still wet, I can drop a little bit more of that dark in. And I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to give my greens over here a little mist. They were drying out on me. I'm going to pick up some of this green. It's the same one that we've already used in the red to darken it. Again, I'm trying to stay with a small sampling of colors and not, you know, try to use every color in the palette for this. I'm going to pick up just a tiny bit of this red. Again, it's the same red I've already used, just to deepen this green up or get a little bit darker. And again, I went too far. This is why it's a learning process. Okay, let's get a lot more green in there. Oh, that's just about perfect. I feel like I've got a more earthy looking green here. And I'm going to do basically the same process and lay some green down where I want it to be darker. And then with a little bit of this lighter green kind of mixed in here, picking up just a tiny amount of the pigment or the paint. I'm just going to kind of blend that out from the darker. So we have some easy shading we're doing here, nothing overly complicated. We're getting depth of color and shadow, but without being real fussy about it, and that's what I kind of like. And yes, I just rinsed a little bit in my clean water. I'm always doing silly things like that. And again, I'm just using just a barely damp brush just for a little blending. And pulling a little bit of color up for a little bit more highlight on the tips of the leaves. And I hope you go and check Maisie's website out. She does these really fun coloring pages. Some of them are more intricate than others, so if you're up for a little bit more challenge, just let me show you an example. She has coloring pages like this as well that you see have more, you know, there's more intricate detail to it, more to be filled in and colored, more color choices to make here, you know. So she has from the more intricate to the simpler like this that I'm coloring today. And this is not a sponsored video, but she did provide me these pages free of charge to try out and test on camera for her, and post a YouTube video, which I was happy to do because I enjoy coloring her coloring pages. Now I'm going to come back to these leaves, or these petals rather. On the flowers that I hadn't finished yet. And again, just with a damp brush, just wetting the area without pigment on it to kind of, because when you wet an area of paper and do it closely to the pigment or the paint that you've already laid down, it's going to pull that paint into the damp area. And that's what kind of helps give us that gradient effect. But in these little tiny spaces, you have to make sure you don't have too much moisture going on, because it'll just run all over the place. And I'm already kind of struggling with staying inside the lines. It's a little bit harder to do with a paintbrush than you realize. My paint was getting a little dry on my palette here, so I needed to drop a little water into it to re-moisten it, reactivate it. And again, I'm going to go in with a damp brush and wet the area on the rest of the petal and just pull that dark pigment into it. Soften out the edge. This is why practicing gradient washes is very useful, because it does have a lot of practical use in painting. in real-time painting, you know. Okay. Oh Lord, and I dropped a big drop of water in here by accident. I definitely need to be more careful here. So I'm drying my brush off and then picking up that drop of water and then just doing my best to blend out the edges. And drop a little more pigment in here, or paint. That'll be fine, I believe. And I'm seeing a hard edge here I'm not liking too much, so I'm just going to see if I can work it out with just a damp brush. There we go. So I'm going to need to moisten my little green mixture here. It was starting to dry out. And I'm going to start working on these leaves here. I'm kind of just going in the center of the leaves with that dark pigment, or the dark green. Kind of along the veining. And I'm going to go ahead and move on. Since I'm in the green, I'm going to go ahead and work on these leaves over here a little bit too. Now I want to lighten this up a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is this is about what I would call a yellow ochre color. And I'm going to mix that in with some of this green here. And I like the way that looks. And it's another color that I'm going to be using. And so I'm going to keep the tonality of the overall painting pretty uniform and cohesive. Because I'm going to use the yellow ochre in the center of the flowers. I need to be careful where I set my hand, which would be so like me. If you've watched any of my videos at all, you know I have a tendency to be somewhat of a klutz in the craft room. Of course, in all honesty, I have a tendency to be a little bit of a klutz everywhere. Well, I am so sorry about that. My camera died, the camera that's on my paints. The battery died, so I had to charge it. And I'm sorry, I did have to finish this, the background on this image, because once you get started with that wet and wet wash, you can't stop. But I didn't go any further. I did leave these until I came back so that we could finish these three together. I just took my mister and kind of gave my palette a little bit of a spritz, and I did replace the water in my water jar so that I could have some clean water to put in the background. And I am switching to my Simply Simmons number 10 brush. I wanted to see how that worked out. A little bit bigger, cover a little bit bigger area. I felt like I was dropping just too small. The amount of paint I was dropping in the areas was too small. Oh, I just went over my image a little bit. I'm just going to be careful there. Sometimes this is awkward to do on camera because I can't really put the paper in a position where I can see it better and you guys still be able to see it adequately. So let's see how this works out. The bigger brush. I'm okay if it goes outside of the lines, you know, on the perimeter, because I'm going to be cutting all this out anyway. I feel like I've got too much water up in this corner. Rinse my brush and dry it off and pick up some fresh clean water again. Dry off my handle and ferrule. Okay, so I went ahead and cut out all my little images, and I just used my guillotine paper cutter, and I did go ahead and cut another piece of white cardstock, and again leaving it with about 1/4 of an inch border all the way around the card. And I'm not going to adhere that just yet. A couple of things I want to do before I go that far is I'm taking an ink pad by Memento, and it's called Rich Cocoa. And so I'm going to ink the edge of this piece of white cardstock. And I'm okay if it's a little bit messy. Because I mean, it's kind of got a gardening theme, so it's got to have the idea of, you know, you got to get a little bit dirty when you're gardening. Okay, I'm going to give those just a little bit to dry before I adhere them. I have a tendency to get ink all over my hands. As you can see, they're bigger than the area I have to work with, so there's going to be some overlapping. Actually, there's going to be a lot of overlapping, so I've got to decide what I want to overlap and where. So I just got an idea while playing with this. I certainly hope you all saw that, because I feel really bad if you didn't, because there's no going back and redoing that, my friends. Okay. I think that is going to work beautifully. I could not be happier. I think that is just perfect. So well, hot dog, hot diggity dog, y'all. I think we got a card. What I'm trying to decide now, I had intention of putting a ribbon on it, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's why I didn't attach the white base to the or the white cardstock to the card base yet, because I was trying to figure out. I often forget to put the ribbon on first before I attach the everything else. But now I'm trying to decide between baker's twine or ribbon. And I'm thinking the baker's twine, because I just think that's going to be really cute. Okay, I think we about got it. Crooked, straight, it is what it is now. It is on. So, woo! I tell you what, this card is taking some work. Normally it doesn't take me this long to make a card, but this really was. I did slow down and really take the time to explain the watercolor process, because I had a viewer that requested that, to really be able to see, you know, the brush going in the water and how much pigment and paint you're loading and so forth and so on. So I really slowed down to take the time to show you in depth the whole process, and except for the lettering, and I apologize, because honestly this is not something that I do normally in cards. It was just, this is a rather large card and I didn't want to have to write a lot of notes. That's terrible. I didn't want to have to write a lot of notes. So I wanted my sentiment to be kind of big. Oh, last step, of course I always do this on every card I make. I had this stamp made. I ordered it from an Etsy shop, and it says handmade by Janine Rick, because I do go through a lot of effort to make these cards for folks, so I want them to know that it was handmade especially for them. This isn't a mass-produced card I went and bought from Hallmark. This is a card that I made especially for the person who's receiving it. So I hope you don't mind that this video was so long. Like I said before, it was a special request for somebody wanting to see a process video. And so sometimes you just need videos to be long for that. Sometimes it just takes time. But anyway, I do appreciate you all being here. And right about here is you see my picture, and if you'll just click on that, it'll take you to my homepage where you can subscribe to my channel, and so that way you'll never miss a new video. And right about here, I'm going to place an iCard. If you feel so moved, you can donate to Janine's Craft Room to help me to cover the cost of supplies that it takes to bring new video content to you with instructions so that I can fulfill the requests that you have. If you feel so moved, please feel free to donate, but if not, don't you worry about it, because your being here is all the gift I could possibly need. Anyway, you guys have a very blessed day. Bye now.